Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today's session of City Scripts is a conversation on a new volume of essays looking at family photographs in India with the editors. The book Framing Portraits, Binding Albums, Family Photographs in India repositions family photographs as living archives that shape how we remember, represent, and relate to histories. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Asha. I'm part of the Word Lab team at IHS, and City Scripts is our monthly curation of book talks and panel discussions that bring the city alive. If you'd like to know more about what we do, please visit the links in the chat. For today's session, we'll be taking questions at the end, so please write in your questions in the Q&A box, and our speakers will respond. I'm very happy to introduce our speakers today. We have Shilpi Goswami, who's an independent editor, researcher, and curator with a PhD in cultural studies. Previously, she was the archivist for the Alkazi Foundation for the Arts, a curator at the Kiran Nada Museum of Art, artistic director of Gallery Nature Mort. She has been a consultant for the Gujral Foundation, Kata Museum, and What About Art at Mehrangarh Museum Trust, and the Maharana of Mewar Charitable Foundation in various capacities. She has co-authored Mastering the Lens Before and After Henry Cartier-Bresson in Pondicherry, and has written an Allegory and Illusion, Early Portrait Photography for South Asia, and Unveiling India, The Early Lensmen, among others. Her most recent work is a co-edited volume, Framing Portraits, Binding Albums, which we'll be talking about today. We also have Suryanandini Narain, who's an assistant professor in visual studies at the School of Arts and Aesthetics at Jawaharlal Nehru University. Her research and critical writing focuses on photography, visual culture, and aesthetics. Her recent scholarly work includes co-editing Framing Portraits and Binding Albums, Family Photographs in India. Thank you both for being with us today. Our moderator for this evening is Siddhi Bhandari, who holds a PhD from the University of Delhi, where she worked on the sociology of photography for a thesis titled Photographers and Photography, a Sociological Study. At present, she is faculty at Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology in Bangalore. Her research and teaching interests include research methods in the social sciences, sociology of work, material culture, visual culture, and oral history. Thank you all for joining us, and over to you, Siddhi.
Thank you, Asha, for those introductions. And I'll get on with it straight away. But just before we begin, to tell you that we'll be in conversation for about 30-40 minutes, followed by Q&A. And between the discussion, conversation, and the Q&A, we'll share some photographs from the book. So welcome and evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us this evening. Like Asha mentioned, we are here today as part of IHS's City Script series, and I will be in conversation with Shilpi and Surya. And congratulations to the two of you. This book was published earlier this year, titled "Framing Photographs, Binding Albums," and I must show you this brilliant cover of the book. This was brought out by Zuban, New Delhi. And and also in terms of time, it comes at an important moment because to consider family photographs as being representative of and marking important moments and events in family life, rituals, though a significant view for a long time, is no longer sufficient to understand photographs that are categorized, especially as family photographs. And this is where this edited volume largely fills the void. The book is impressive in its scale with 21 essays spread over 500 pages. It is divided into 8 thematic sections, each taking on and addressing different aspects of family that range from migration, displacement, to intergenerational dialogues, from imagining archives to visualizing gender and ethnic margins, social hierarchies, and the politics of representation. A point I must also mention about these 8 thematic sections, and editors have made a note of it in the introduction of the book as well, and I think you can speak about it a little more, is that each section is prefixed with reimagined, relocated, regendered, reinvoked, recalibrated, recentered, revisited, and rearticulated. And as they say, as an articulation of new photographic responses to historical matter. Again, the list of contributors to the book, it's diverse and includes scholars, artists, writers, curators, brought together through the shared interest in family photographs, whether personal or otherwise. And both the editors also have a chapter in the book. The style and the format of some of the chapters is conversational as much as, for the others, as much as it is academic. The introduction also gives the reader an insight into a very distinct and defined process and exhaustive approach that they followed, leading up to the publication of this book, which includes workshops, talks, and so on. And we'll hear more about it from both Shilpi and Surya. So now to get the conversation rolling, let's begin from the beginning. So tell us a little bit of your association with each other. And with that, how did the idea of this book come about? Any anecdote related to the origin of the book?
Surya, would you like to?
Yeah, no, for me, this was something that had come from teaching at JNU. I've been teaching there now for 10 years, and for photography is one of the optional papers that I teach. And I found students coming forth with a lot of inquiries about family photographs. And I had nothing to turn to in terms of material from South Asia, from India. There's quite a lot of international writing on it, but I hadn't got anything local. And so I started to investigate this further. My own thesis was looking at a certain kind of photographic matter around women, but family suddenly became a focus because there was so much inquiry around it. And I remember speaking about it to Shilpi in a different context. We met actually for a different, project, and Shilpi had the same kind of inquiry going for her. I think it was just a good team that got together, and we started to address this question and realize that there's much potential, there's much curiosity, and no material available in terms of an academic source. So it is really my students that I have to thank when I come to questioning as to how I came about putting this together.
See, it was slightly different for me because I was an archivist with the Al Ghazi Foundation. And a very peculiar realization started coming in, which was there were we did brilliant books and brilliant exhibitions all across the world and also nationally. And after a while, after the preliminary linear histories that you write, researching about the photo studios, researching about the types, researching about general bifurcations, we could not, I started getting more curious about the people who were in the picture. At that point of time, I was also transitioning into the curatorial role at the Kiranadar Museum of Art, and that's when I reconnected with Surya. I always knew her work. I had never had the opportunity to meet her. She was the only one who was working on family photographs. There was nobody else who was doing it, not even me, actually. I've been a photo historian, but that is not what I was doing. And Surya and I just started conversing about, I was like, who are these people? The mundane who just do not get written about, the middle class. People who were our direct ancestors, not iconic figures about whom we get to read about, who get written about, iconic figures, whether they were the people in the pictures or the people who shot the pictures. So who are these mundane middle class people? And that's how we started conversing. And we realized that there was a lot that has been done in the world, but there was not a single formal document, academic document, or any kind of academic inquiry for, except I think in media studies, Professor Janki Ibrahim still dealt with a bit of family in her studies, but not in still. That was more to do with that had its own media limitations. So that's how we started, and we thought, okay, let's try and get a couple of people and hear what they are doing. And it was as simple as that. And then it catapulted into something else.
Right, right. And it's also nice that you both balanced it out, because Surya said it's a very, her classes were really the source, whereas you're pointing to the others. And let me tell you, I've gone through the book and it's for everyone. It's as relevant for academics as it is for anyone who's interested in ways of looking at family photographs. So that's that. Uh, so also, given the evolving understanding of family, how did you sort of conceptualize family photographs for this volume? In a broad sense, what constitutes family photographs and subsequently the family album? Uh, and just, two views that sort of help me orient my viewing. One is the subject and the familial ties that sort of get displayed in the photograph. And second is the rituals that form around the viewing, often collective, remembering, narratives, and so on. So the family photograph, in this conventional sense, further maintain and ritualize the family familial relations and ties. But for the book, it's sort of really taking even that sociological understanding of the family beyond how we conceptualize it. So yeah. So what was where were you? Did you renegotiate some of those boundaries of the family album? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I previously studied sociology for my undergraduate degree, and I know how important kinship studies are. So, my understanding of family came from that kind of background. And I thought, family photographs would very easily be illustrative of the types of family and everything that we'd studied. I was always surprised that anthropology and sociology in India don't use more images from fieldwork. They could, but they don't, considering that photography and ethnography are so entwined outside. How come we have such little visual material? So we looked at a very direct kind of relationship between family and photographs, only to be quite surprised by the fact that the family itself came into question. One of the fundamental inquiries that this book generates is, what is the family? Exactly that. Because photography peels away these layers of assumption, especially with the very deep analysis that our writers ended up doing. We were quite surprised with the depth of the inquiry that many of them did. And at the end of it, we had so many iterations of what family could mean: families of choice, families in memory and imagination, families that have a completely different kind of composition from what we conventionally expect, or even outside a little bit of what convention is. I think photography has come to challenge it. So, as much as we say there is this familial gaze, as Marianne Hirsch says, and it is the camera that produces the family for the photographic moment, there are these narratives around that image that completely break our assumption about what a family finally means. And we have several authors questioning this through the visual medium. Whether it's gendered or queer identities, marginalization, generational trauma, everything that inquires about how the family is supposed to have been for them historically and seems so in the image and isn't actually. So that kind of revelation came through, and we decided to put this forth without mitigating any of the larger questions that photography can raise about family composition.
Siddhi, we were very clear that right from the onset, I mean, both of us had done our PhD, so we do realize how contesting the normal notions or the conventional academic notions of family or any type of stereotype like that or nomenclature is important. What I observed while the papers started coming in, rather what came up in the discussions that we had with our authors through the master classes, through the indoor closed door seminars and conferences that we held, was how this entire dynamic of spectatorship and observers changed. Normally, we take a stance of take a stance from a very political or a sociological point of view. But it was quite invigorating to see how these people took control of agencies and contested it at the same point of time while reflecting on the content that they were talking about. Um, Also, another very, very essential thing that happened was essential, I say it with all the pun intended, the pandemic happened. And we were all behind closed doors. We were not able to move. We saw families crumble. We saw our loved ones go. We subconsciously started questioning the who was more important, who was not, because we all have felt the relationships changed overnight. Whether that was with your friends, that was, I think all of that deeply impacted the process. Another very strange thing, I mean, this two, three things really, really shaped this book, two, three incidences. First one was 5th of January in 2020, Surya and I are sitting along with a huge crowd of people, which was organized by the Murti Naik Foundation at Museo Camera in Gurgaon. And she showed me what was happening in JNU. That was the day when all the JNU just went up.
Yeah, there was a big attack on a very peaceful,
Students
yeah,
and
peaceful
yeah,
demonstration by the students. It was a meeting actually by students and faculty, and there was violence on campus just that very day.
that very day it was coming. I mean, I was seeing in live, like real time. Then the pandemic just changed, as I repeatedly mentioned. Another thing was, in the last leg, when we were waiting for a couple of papers to come, Manipur went up in flames, literally. So we have literally been witness and navigated through so many political unrests, and these are only the main ones that I'm talking about. There were many others. So all of those social, political, all these incidences impacted the papers that you see.
Right. And also to mention the anti-CAA protests that were happening where both of you are located, which happened right before the pandemic. Yeah. And you've, made a note of it in the book, which is much, appreciated. And I hope more of you will get a chance to read it. It really lays out, the process. Now, since you're talking about this, I'm just wondering if you want to since you've mentioned these closed door workshops, talks, and so on, could you tell us a bit more as to what happened in these, and because it's not just a collaboration between the two of you as editors, it's a collaboration at many levels. So how did it take shape and what was some of the shared and divergent vision for the book, given, of course, all of this, the context that it was happening in?
Yeah.
See, Siddhi, I come from a publishing background. I am a graduate in publishing. So, navigating through academic processes with various editors, scholars, academicians has been a part of my training. Part of my professional requirement also, to be very honest. Each this book, practically an entire village came to help us. Really, we say that very clearly in our acknowledgement. It was a collaboration between India Foundation for the Arts, who enabled us to pay our authors. It was a production grant from the Moti Naik Foundation, who enabled the production of the book physically to ease out, because it is a huge volume. We really salute Zuban and Zuban's team for bearing with us. Now, two, three things happened. IFA made a very important suggestion. That is, if we were to give money, they had a very simple thing. If we were to give money, why don't you try to give publishing or publish space to newer scholars, the older scholars and older academicians? And it was said very politely, but it was almost like a mandate. And that's what um, actually prompted Surya and me to first start thinking about it. So that is how we went about choosing our authors. We were aware. I mean, both of us, she, of course, teaches in a university. I read a lot. So we were aware of a lot of scholars, but that's how we started. Now, the problem with younger scholars is when you are writing for a publication, it's not like an exam. We had to handhold a lot of people. It was also to ensure that they have the confidence to be truthful and honest to their own work. So we held closed door masterclasses with Urvashi, of course. That was it was very obvious. But two more masterclasses were held by Professor Shurajit Sarkar. At that point of time, Shurajit was teaching in Ambedkar University, and Sarnath Banerjee. Sarnath, Shurajit is very obvious because he has worked with archives and all. Sarnath gotten the normalcy of middle class humor, and that just changed the perspective. Of course, we had two excellent observers, that is Professor Tapti Goa Thakurta and Professor Malvika Kardekar, who patiently heard each and every person talk. So it was a very long drawn process which happened in phases. We literally gave that much of time to for our scholars to grow into a thought. It doesn't happen that, oh, you just have a thought and today, tomorrow, in a month's time you will be able to write. There were many papers which were proposed. In the end, we got letters from people that after the pandemic we do not want to write about it. And Surya and I, we had to say yes because those papers seemed genuine, and that is the process that we had decided to follow. Of course, we it all sounds ideal. Literally, we we were under a lot of stress with the administrative work of, or the editorial work of the publication, or the scale of the publication. However, we also had figured it out right at the onset. One, we will not stop from people to change at the last hour, because that's what the workshops and the conferences should have happened. You grow. Second, we will not put it in a structure frame. If people came up to us and said, we want to have a conversation going, like Rajshri Gudi and Jai Singh Nageshwaran, and some of them said that, no, we just want to reflect on somebody else's picture, and we were okay with it. Of course, we were looking at it editorially, but yeah, that is how conversations happen in families of any kind.
There was a
Surya?
lot of individual feedback. So we want, and this isn't something that we started off with. I mean, we were ready to get drafts and then do edits and then get whatever final draft back. But it didn't work like that. We had to build in a kind of very consistent peer reviewing process that these workshops enabled. Then they all presented, like, made papers for this other conference to which Professor Guha Thakurta and Professor Karlekar were actually, giving feedback to each and every paper. We also encouraged conversations between the authors themselves, giving feedback on each other's papers. We were all apart. We hadn't met each other. So we also realized the lack of support and community. There was a lot of reading material that was shared, hundreds of texts that were shared on this big Google Drive file. So people had material to access. And it was, for many people, a fairly emotional process. I mean, this is family. So whether they're writing about their own or somebody else's, in the time of pandemic, there's all sorts of upheavals, really. But I think in the end, Shilpi and I were both very surprised by the depth of research. Given that many of these people, the authors were this was first time publishing. They did their drafts. They did two drafts, three drafts if they had to. They went after the kind of texts we suggested. They really, really dug deep and have come out with some very surprising conclusions. So the essays in themselves are very unexpected and very exciting.
Great. So now I'm just going to pick on the title of the book, and when you say family photographs, it takes for granted their existence. There's a certain historicity to the notion of family photographs in most of the chapters in the book. So how does it help and make sense, inform and make sense of contemporary family photographs? And I'm also thinking of the recently concluded Cop Shiva show here in Bangalore, No Longer a Memory, which is on remembering and recreating photographs with his mother, where there were no childhood or family photographs. So why would something like that fit in a volume like this? Or if there aren't already existing photographs, how? Yeah.
So I think Shilpi's essay entirely addressed that absence. But before I hand over to her, I just want to say about the title. We were looking at the kind of framings that family itself has in society, and what is the kind of photograph that goes after producing this generic idea of the family. The kind of photos we see in wedding albums and so on. The family group together smiling away. So that was the kind of starting point, but we did reach this point of unframing and unbinding the idea of photography and the idea of family itself. That is where the book took us. So the intent was to look at what frames the family, and then everything fell apart pretty much. But about the absent family archive, Shilpi's own essay was on that.
I think
Yeah.
Siddhi, I'm fundamentally an introvert and I do not talk about my family. Not that I have any problem with that. It's just that writing about your family academically is not a joke. You know too much. You are a participant to that. And Surya, thanks to Surya, actually, she arm twisted me into writing. And then after that, the pandemic happened. I had no other choice but to write on it. I was the archivist of one of the largest collections of photography. My last few years have gone in looking at visuals of all kinds, whether that was photographic or artistic, for, thanks to my profession. Ironically, my generation is there, but my parents' generation, my paternal side, dad is left with only 3 pictures, only 3. And that too, I think I managed to salvage it because it was about to be destroyed. My mother's side, only 1 album was left. You see, they were refugees. They fell prey to the partition. And it was never spoken about. It was very ironic also because my aunts and uncle were great conversationalists. They had a good sense of humor, sharp wit, but never did they speak about their past. And such is the depth and the intensity of transgenerational trauma, which you can't um, cross or can't evade when you are engaging with your diasporic displaced family. So my paper is called Between Silences and Erasures. Similarly, many other books, when we talk about family photographs, or our first reaction to them goes like picnics, birthday parties, wedding albums, happy stuff. It's only when you start digging deeper, that's when you realize that it's all of ours. There was a lot that things got hidden. I remember one particular, Shurajit did the masterclass. He said, before he took the masterclass, he told everybody to choose out one picture out of all the family pictures that each individual had, each author had, which did not make any meaning to them. It could be blurred, it could be not anything at all. And I happily went and chose mine. And I thought it was an out of focus picture of me and my sister on top of the income tax building in Calcutta. For some reason, it was shot there. And I thought that it wasn't anything at all. It's only while I was coming back from my mother's house, I realized that it was a very significant picture. I did not even realize till I saw it. And when I started reflecting on it, because the reason for why my mother served the income tax office, that was the first time my parents were building a house. And it was iconic for them because both of them came from absolutely displaced families. and why it was very important, and why two kids were left on the streets of Calcutta to wander around. And that is just me. Similarly, there are
Right.
many other papers that
Yeah. So, but what is also good about those essays that are very personal in nature, including yours, Shilpi, is that they're able to move from the specific family cultural space to provide a view that is generalizable and can inform analysis of photograph across time, culture, and context. So yes, it comes from a very personal space, like you sharing with us, and some of the essays also pick on this very personal thing, but it's able to move on and provide us much more than just a history of the family. And we'll share some photos from the book in a little bit. And you'll see how that has happened, and how authors have also made a note of it, particularly. Anyway, we'll come to it when we do. But just one more thing on the title, Family Photographs in India. Now, if I can, persuade you to tell us some of those indices of this Indianness, that also, that what is the Indian these in the analysis, in the family photographs? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, just to go back to the earlier inquiry that you had about history, memory, and the contemporary moment, I think photography is that one method that can make connections across time, right? It can negotiate between the specificities of history and the nebulousness of memory in a way very little else can. A photograph can be looked at through either approach. And the family photos, particularly, vulnerable to being interpreted entirely nostalgically, or actually having a very historic kind of presence, not only for the family, but for the nation. So, there is this whole idea, and this actually segues into your current question about the Indianness of family photography, a certain visuality, a certain social unit that we are looking at. And that really reminds me about the kind of families that we have always visualized as a nation, whether it is the Nehru Gandhi family or something like that, that becomes emblematic as a family. And whether we're looking at that image, which is for a political expression, or whether it is actually from their personal album, Raghu Rai's done a lot of work on them. And, it kind of rests between that very emotional space and somewhere where power emanates and, has this statement for the nation that this is the leading family of the country. So we looked at various families that also represented community identity. For instance, we have people who wrote about political unrest in the Northeast. We had, Dalit memory associated with family. That kind of very specific intersectional dialogue that family photographs facilitated. It was discussed in many essays in this volume. So there were touches on significant moments of history, what was happening personally when very major shifts like partition were happening. That kind of recall. Aditi Gupta's essay also addresses that. Basically brings this idea of nation as family together in an overarching sense. We certainly don't claim to have covered everything. We realize there's several volumes possible that our editor has told us that she's not going to handle for us because it's massive and very uneven writing. But I think together, you're right, between the covers of this book, and a kind of national sensibility develops, right? In the essay that I wrote, I'm looking at a particular woman who traverses this nation through travel. She's taking holidays to different parts of the country, and she's traveling with her rather kind of cumbersome family unit of 3 children and a husband, and she's cooking and all as well. But she's very keen to photograph it all. So again, what is the idea of India and the nation in these very groups that we are looking at? And you're right about, sensing that.
Siddhi, I'm also compelled to mention that this was not a holistic definition of India as we see it.
No,
I'm
absolutely. And I think you've mentioned it both in the cover of the book and the introduction that it's not intended to be comprehensive, but just some of the.
Yes, it is also
Yeah.
that because of editorial, we left out a lot. We left out a lot of segments, like how to deal with contested identities like the tribals. Tribals cannot be spoken about, or authorship cannot happen just in one go or from one lens. There are multiple identities of the tribes who live in India. Similarly, for caste, even though we do touch upon basics of caste, we do touch upon basics of gender, but largely, I think most of the papers come from a very urban space. In most of the paper in our book, barring one or two, come from a very, very urban landscape of India, of how we understand it. So we are absolutely aware that I think most of India is still left out. And it was not by choice, it was more to do with situation. Yeah.
Right. Great. So now, since you're talking about a lot was left, I mean, about the book, could you just tell us something about the 8 sections that are there? And, I read out one sort of a sentence, a half a sentence from the book that said, the prefixing the re is an articulation of new photographic responses to historic matter. So if the two of you could just reflect on that usage a little bit, it's very interesting, it's novel, and yeah.
Thank you. But I mean, with this fairly straightforward, the thing is that the family is taken for granted. Its photographs have been taken for granted. Are we looking at it critically with potential, with a certain inquiry into ourselves? Not really. We hadn't done that. So can we re-look per se through various kind of configurations of revisitation of our own albums? I mean, the idea is for people to look at their own family archive in a new way. Firstly, archive it, please don't throw it away. And secondly, to look at it anew from whatever lens it is that you want. That so I think time plays a very big factor, the vector of time. That you are going to look back. You're not going to have the perspective of the person who made the image or was in the image at that point. So your location itself is something that is about relooking. It cannot erase anything, any of the narratives that were there earlier. You will have another kind of perspective. So specifically, it was looking at all the dimensions that we've discussed: caste, gender, things like that. And the other thing that I feel, perhaps helped us enter issues of marginality, as Shilpi was saying. We may not have looked at all the details of, the tribal population of India, but something like Sharbendu Day's artistic work that looks at the Lisu community and through a very artistic kind of reinterpretation is fantastic. It's the only colored images in the book, because it was an artwork. It is actually the only contemporary art practice that has been written about in the book by Ranu Rai Chaudhary. And that kind of inquiry is again very interesting because it takes the dimension of contemporary practice. It is not about having a very straightforward kind of examination of the albums and images that are already there. So
We basically tried to break the rigidity of the space and time continuum in how we perceive images and how we see them. That is the reason re was, and it was left open. We've also said very openly while we were having a discussion earlier that it is for the editorial comfort that we have bifurcated them into 8 sections. Although most of the papers we had realized right at the beginning that it could be placed in any section and still make a lot of sense. So at the same point of time, it is not casual. So just the depth and the layers that came out from the papers is, yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. So also, this process of editing this volume, did it reorient your own research and practice around this? And what are some of the learnings that you'd carry forward?
It tested me for sure. Yeah. I came full circle. Urvashi taught me at it university. She is the person who taught me. And we had gone to just request her to suggest how do we go about it. And she offered that she will just put it up with her editorial board. It literally was like that. And after that, I was literally giving my exam to her with the entire process that I have learned and how I handle things. But jokes apart, um, it has been challenging because we allowed the formats to be different and we allowed the independence of that format. We did not put any kind of um, framework or expected framework, and that was by choice and design. That really was challenging. How to navigate through it, how to place it. There were two more essays, unfortunately, which got withdrawn at the last hour because both of them came from Kashmir, and for various reasons, they withdrew it. But even with those papers, which were brilliant also, um, I think that is where our technical challenge lied. Not thought, not there was no challenge to the thought. I think we had evolved, all of us. I would say this that we stand together with all our authors because we evolved with them, really. As Surya repeatedly mentioned, that it was the authors and their depth which kept on surprising us. And it's a very harmonious kind of a relationship that you land up making in spite of having never met them. Many of them we have not met. Some of them were nominated by me, some of them were nominated by Surya. It was not always the case that we knew each and every person. But this independence of the format was challenging. That I will not disagree.
Yeah,
Surya?
I don't have much to add over there, but
Okay.
it's something that we had to be very accepting of and willing in terms of okay, our own writing. I mean, I'm glad I got done with my essay when I did because I would have gotten very confused had I jumped into reading everyone else's essays before I finished mine. But I think it's really fantastic. Everyone will find something, some form of writing that will appeal to them in the book. It's not going to be boring, similar kind of essays at all. It's very diverse.
No, definitely. And, as a sociologist who's in an art and design college, I see this book as a great way of introducing and opening up ways of looking at family photographs. And it's going to have significance for different disciplines, including sociology, history, art history, oral history, and more specifically for family studies, material and visual culture. But that said, whether you're a scholar or someone just interested in ways to understand family, I think this book will provide those lenses through which this can be done in many many ways. Yeah. So we'll, if I could request the IHS team to just put on that slideshow with some photographs from the book, but I believe they've also, some of the audience have volunteered family photographs, and we could just see that uh, before the quick Q&As. After that, we'll open the floor for Q&A. And yeah, you could type in your questions in the message box and I'll read it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is from the Anglo-Indian archives that Adira is putting together. So yeah, that's the context. It is not her personal family uh, albums or pictures.
Mm. Yeah, Adira's like taking care of these Anglo-Indian archives that are being built. And actually now this is looking at issues of race, nationality, and really the colonial and immediate post-colonial. So it's a very interesting community that is dwindling. It is a small group, and this archive then becomes a controlled but very important repository for memory of a culture that is not there anymore in a large way. So that is a preservation.
They are also endangered, to be honest, because
Yeah.
somebody has amassed, and fortunately, Adira, along with a couple of others, are looking at the preservation of it.
Right. And along with that, it also, this chapter addresses questions of ethical responsibility and representation within that archival context. So, yeah, as methodological, if someone's interested in those, it will be relevant. Thanks. This again is from
Avira's thing. This is
Yeah.
from same archive, and it's handwritten. Bifurcation of one particular family, family tree rather,
Mhm.
which goes back a lot of generations.
I mean, just the possibility of it, that the community is close enough to be able to make these genealogical charts. I mean, how many of us can take it back so many generations? Yeah. Yeah, this is Ajay's work. Ajay has a really evocative essay about being brought up by a single mother in deprived circumstances, and how photography was so important for her. To have this kind of double portrait taken was very important to her, and she put together resources and had a very she made an event out of these kind of images as she was bringing up her children to have documented them as they grew. So we know that about our childhoods, but what when resources are scarce, how important it is to mark our lives with photographs along the rites of passage or whatever you think are important moments in time. So
While doing that, he also reflects on the cities, Bombay, where he grew up in, and where his mother was struggling hard to go about explaining. I mean, basically earning and providing a livelihood to her children. The urban scapes converge with the existing photographs of his family. Yeah.
yeah,
Right. And this chapter is also interesting because the point I was making about, to move from the particular to, generalize. And I think it's also telling of the societal changes that were taking place in the 90s and 2000s, which the author makes a mention of through the photographs and the narratives around the photographs.
We
Yeah.
intentionally kept these pictures because you can see what time does, what they are a little chipped off. Certain places you will see they're not particularly in ship shape, if I were to use that terminology. And that's what our memory is about our families. Um, it fades, it reorients itself in our memories, and it reorients as our understanding as we age, as we grow. That's what Ajay's paper was about.
yeah. Yeah, his mother's actually part of that community project, which is for housing and for helping other women. So that kind of social intervention where one family supports another, that's also part of her archive here. Yeah. So Anna's done very interesting work about archival photographs from Manipur. And here she's looking at a particular time in the history of the state where commemoration becomes an important event, right? And how a political event translates and percolates back into family. How do family albums? This is another thing that another set of authors did for Darjeeling in the book, looking at these very, very major political events through women's stories, through domestic stories, through their own family albums of what was going on at that time personally. How do we translate these major moments into personal narratives? How does it kind of percolate?
This is very ironic again, because in the last when they had to send authors had to send the last drafts. Anna was of course in Manipur, and uh, Manipur went up in flames. Even though this is a previous picture clicked much before the current events, the last 2 years of events in Manipur, but Manipur was literally up in flames, and she was in hiding, trying to save her life. And I think this image, after all of that incident, we had to stop the work. We had to wait for her to respond because there was no internet, there was no access. Hats off to her in spite of all of that, in spite of literally threat to life. She was able to send it after a few days. And this image made a lot more sense. This is, of course, her.
Right.
Yeah, more from her own family album. I think it's the coming together of political imagery, say from a news source, with a family album photograph for constructing this kind of essay that is quite interesting and important. I mean, in our minds, it's part of the same continuum. We've had several of these kind of interventions of mainstream media images with personal images and how they form part of a kind of composite life as such.
There has been political unrest in the northeastern belt, which many a time doesn't get reported in the national
Yeah.
media.
And or in the family photograph, all we see is happiness and peace over here. We don't know what's going on.
This is exactly what she said.
Yeah.
And that although you see a lot of picnic pictures and all, but Imphal was up in flames and people being slaughtered in many of these incidences, whereas these people were totally away from that entire geopolitical situation.
Yeah, the importance of the family photo to basically mark survival, mark a certain kind of stability, the desire for stability and cohesion at a time that didn't make sense. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a really interesting work by Charan Singh, who looks at queer identity in the face of expectations by family. And his essay is again very personal, very evocative, titled "What Would My Father Think?" And he is looking at perhaps a construction of a dialogue, a constructed dialogue with his father when he reveals a certain identity, certain choices, and how that would really affect the kind of fabric, conventional the fabric of a patriarchal familial setup. And he's done a huge body of work with regard to this kind of inquiry, and this is a sample of that, this double kind of portrait.
Mhm.
Shilpi, you have to talk about this one, just because you said that you won't.
This is it's too Bengali for me. No, jokes apart. This is very strange because you see, postmortem pictures or postmortem photography is not a common practice in India or South Asia. It is. It is in the. It was in England, at least during the Victorian period. It was postmortem photography was a very big thing. Um, but this is a very, very detailed thing. It has multiple layers to it. Apart from just being postmortem picture, it also means, in all probability, she was a very young widow. Also, it is a painted picture with wreaths and all. So I have a feeling that it is a Brahmo family or an Anglo-Indian family who uh, well, yeah, young widow, and yes, this is of course
Yeah.
we all have such pictures of our grandparents in our albums.
Yeah. No, it's also amazing because we've
It's
seen other kind of locations in the home, these kind of family photos taken in the home, and this rooftop kind of portraiture is something that a lot of people actually did because there's natural light. But there is also a sense of freedom that you don't get within the interiors of the home to kind of experiment. We have examples from other contexts, not in part of this book, of couples cross-dressing, posing very amorously or playfully on the rooftop, because this was not possible in the domestic structure below. So it's an interesting placement within the household as well as to how the couple visualizes itself.
Yeah. So in fact, these last two photos, like I think Shilpi mentioned, are from Hardik Brata Biswas's chapter titled Acts of Presentation, which really looks at representing women, but sees the disruption in the way women are represented by including, I think this last one is like a cross-dressed, I think both are women and death photographs. So those mark points of departure from how women are typically or were typically represented in family photographs. Yeah. Okay. We can move on. I think there have been some photographs from the audience as well. Would you want to share those? I'm sure we're all reflecting on ways, and
Yes,
so
I'll just load that up. Yeah.
yeah. So while you do, I think the first question is, is it's not a question. It's asking if there is an attempt at making a digital accompaniment to the book, which might provide resources like studios in different cities. And this is really coming from, their own family albums are getting ruined and environmental moisture, etc. And would, if there's a way to preserve them through this. So I don't know if you have a digital map or if you have any plans for that, but
Not
I
really.
think we should have like a collective
Yeah.
crowdsource that and create
Unfortunately,
something.
no. Unfortunately, no. I wish we could have said yes, but no. And this has been our persistent concern.
Yeah, one of the organizations internationally that we were very inspired by was the Family Camera Network, and this is a U.S. Canada based coming together of scholars who basically went around making film footage, and scanning family albums for people who just came forth with their material. And that kind of social intervention, of course, requires a lot of resources and setting aside of time, etc. But that is the kind of initiative that is needed to preserve family photographs, family archives. Digitization is basic stuff, but also how to keep the analog images, from getting ruined or whatever. But I think it's a very important thing if anybody wants to take that up. Online, there are things like the Indian Memory Project that allows you to upload images, not only of family, but any kind of archival photograph that you have knowledge and agency over, that it is something you should know something about and you should have a relationship with that image. So I think these kind of initiatives towards family are generally there, but
I
not.
don't know I can say this or not, but I think there is a museum called George Eastman Museum, which is based out of New York. They have on their YouTube channel, they have put a series of videos on various formats and how to keep their photographs. That's very helpful, actually. That's very helpful. It was very handy for me while I was working as an archivist at the Al-Ghazi Foundation, because in a snapshot you get certain things which you can visually see. Otherwise, everything is written in books, which is not always easy to follow.
So, but thanks for pointing that out, Priyanka. I think it'll inspire someone to take that on. Yeah. So the next question is from Ishita Shah. Okay. So before we move on to the question, just to look at some of the photographs that came in from the audience, which IIHS's team, the Word Lab team, solicited. So I don't know whose photo it is, but the caption that accompanies it says, this photo is a snapshot of a childhood made full by love. Three cousins who are more like sisters perched on the hood of an old Jeep, lost in shared laughter and quiet secrets, barefoot and beaming. We were a little tribe of our own with the neighbor's dog as our silent guardian. Even though I grew up as an only child, I never felt alone. This moment has stayed with me through every stage of life. It reminds me of the deep bond we shared and the comfort of being surrounded by people who felt like going home. Wherever I go, this memory brings me back to who I am.
Yeah, the two essays that come to mind immediately. One is actually Chinar Shah's essay, which is about it's about new cars. It's not about old cars. How the car showroom always has a family pose with that very large, exaggerated key and the car. It's such a moment. And I think the 1960s, 70s onwards, we've always had this kind of inclusion of white goods or a certain kind of assets that the family acquires when it comes into money as part of the family photograph. So you see many of them with television sets gadgets or fridge or radio or etc. when it actually came into the market. So anyway, I think this is also a big reminder for Diya Datta and Jayanti Datta's essay, which documents the Diya and Jayanti are mother and daughter, and about the mother's travels and how this was such a big moment for her to actually travel across India and meet her cousins and so on. So this kind of feminine bonding across generations is an important kind of presence in family photographs for sure.
Yeah. And of course, these objects become props in so many of these photographs, be it,
Right.
a photo like that, or even studio photographs that just add, a telephone or markers of modernity, social mobility, and so on. Okay, so the next photo is, the caption reads, "My family had gone through many hardships leading up to this photo, and here we're just goofing around and having a good time." It felt like for the first time in ages, things might be okay. Since then, I will at times look at this photo in my phone and remember whatever is going on in life, this too shall pass. And the good times will roll. It has followed me everywhere from my tiny hometown across 3 continents. I hold it dear. Um, yeah. The next one is the caption reads, "My father doesn't click a lot of pictures, but he holds this picture close to his heart. It's his young family's, which is constantly on the move, first outing in a new city and taken around 2002.
I think this idea of the family collecting around the threshold is really important. Just at the point of entry or exit, usually getting ready and going somewhere, and then because you're all looking nice, taking that picture. I mean, the artist Dayanita Singh really talks about her mother taking pictures all the time when they're ready to go, and then she would just hold back her daughters and take these pictures. Much to everyone's irritation, everybody would be getting late, but that
Most of the
photograph
time
had to
most of the
be
time
there. It had
typing
to
and
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Or the previous photograph, of how a photograph becomes a memory, and that's just a happy memory. The author
Yeah.
keeps saying that, they keep going back to the image
Yeah.
as a source of inspiration, or just,
I
like they
think
say, things.
family tableau really holds, also the fact that we always look at studio photography and domestic photography as different things. But here, that kind of arrangement of figures, the father sitting in the middle with the children around, is somewhere very studio-like. I think that kind of metaphor carries on from an experience that we are somehow familiar with, how to arrange the bodies and appear together as a cohesive unit, all the bodies touching each other and holding each other. It's the way a family must look so as a family.
Right. I'll quickly move on to the questions, and coming back to Ishita's, she of course says that the reading and writing process described in the discussion is undoubtedly inspiring. And she's wondering if you had considered or were able to get other family members, extended community apart from just the author, to participate in any of the workshops or review process. Or was there an intention to write from a personal space and only critically review that form of writing?
See, both things happened. Both things happened, but inclusion of the family just happened by chance. It was not by design. In case of Diya and Jayanti Datta, they were a mother and daughter duo who were writing together on something. But other than that, it was an academic process, and we were not getting into the nostalgia or harping upon looking into it. Our main job was to be able to articulate critically about our observations and make something as mundane as family photographs be studied in the visual landscape academically. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, we didn't include
I
family
see.
members.
We must have all the authors independently must have, because I had
Yeah,
to
they
interview
did.
a lot of people. But that was more to do with collecting the resources and material to write. But that was not the main focus.
Of course, I think people responded, once they saw their essays and their
did.
photos out there. There was a lot of deep response that people had on their stories being published, their images being published, which the authors would know directly. A lot of them turned up for the book launch as well, which we had in January in Delhi. There were families there who had actually featured in the book. So I think this is an idea that, okay, we are being discussed and archived in a different framework.
No, even in the Bangalore one, when we previewed the book, we had a very candid discussion amongst all the audiences. The conversation just went into the audience. Surya and I did not have much to respond to. We just sat back and heard, and I. There were a couple of very senior people who were there because it was part of a big festival IFA had done for their research projects. But so there were a couple of senior directors of institutions and all who came and reflected on their families, albums, and the absences of it, which was so interesting.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so the next question is from Paroma, who says that considering the plethora of lens-based practitioners working with family archives, photos, along with those perhaps not actively part of the practice itself, how did you decide on who was going to be a part of the book? Was there an open call, and what was the process of selection? Yeah, I think you've both responded to it in the course of the discussion, but please.
I wish we could have had a democratic way of making an open call, but it was just me and Surya. And the nightmare that comes along with making open calls is not something we were equipped. So, and since it was an academic volume, it was completely by nomination. So we were aware of people, historians, visual historians, budding historians, budding art historians. So it was particularly by nomination.
Yeah, we just took this as a method. And hoping that there'll be more writing that this will generate and a space for it by more people. But we didn't go through it in a conventional call for papers.
We didn't have the luxury of resources. We couldn't have.
Okay. So let me read out a comment and then we move on to the next question. This is Malvika Bhatia, who says, this is an amazing project, and she's the director of Citizens Archive of India. And, I conduct a workshop for people who want to know where or even to start with their family photos and memorabilia. And this book is going to be a great help, I'm sure. Please do more volumes and get, so yes, that's, yeah.
Thank you, Malvika. Siddhi, there is one comment on the Kashmir thing.
Yes, I'll come back to the question. I just wanted to read out a comment before.
Thank you, Malvika.
Yeah. So why were Kashmir images dropped? This is a question from me.
We were not the people to drop it. In fact, we insisted that it be there. But given the current political situation of Kashmir, the authors withdrew it themselves. And then I had a long conversation with the publisher, and eventually she said, after coaxing, when they did not feel safe to share it, she said, let it be, it should be.
Yeah, we had to let
it go. We were very sad when they withdrew it. Yeah. And it got withdrawn at the last hour.
Right. I think you've made mention of a lot of other political things happening at the site. So, I mean, I believe that you wouldn't have left it out, as an editorial decision. So,
never.
Yeah. And I think the same person has two more questions. Do photographs preserve truth, or do they create their own kind of fiction? Yeah. And Shilpi, the next. Yeah.
Both.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is an ongoing sort of debate in photography itself, about whether it is veracity for which photography stands or if it is fiction. I think this is beyond the scope of this discussion. But I think it does both, right? I mean, what we also called fiction or highly subjective kind of representation brings a different kind of truth quality to life. So no matter how the photograph itself is composed as documentary or fictional, it does bring a certain kind of reading into life. And that is, I think, what we need to look towards.
The second question I can answer, but please bear in mind, whoever this gentleman or lady is, that an author or a researcher will always write from their perspective. So when I was commenting on the absences of photographs and the erasures, which were systemic, which were subconsciously systemic in my own family, I was writing from my perspective. Under no circumstance can I gather people who were either in the pictures or who even clicked the pictures, even if they were alive. Many of them were. So, yeah, it is always from the author's personal take that what is it that you're trying to make uh, heard by a larger group of people. Next.
Right. Thank you. So again, a comment for both of you to feel good about. I just wanted to thank you for this brilliant conversation, reframe the family archive away from the surface level saccharine relation to memory. And this was really insightful. And again, the next, but I think there's a question there. I worked on family photographs this is from Karan Tekwani. What has fascinated me is the question, what qualifies as family photograph? It seems there cannot be a fixed definition because each family has its own ritual and understanding. This porous capacity to absorb is both interesting and challenging aspect of research. Okay, so no question in there, but a nice long comment. Yeah. And again, Smriti Mehra saying, fabulous process. Is there any documentation of the workshops that were the closed door workshops?
There were. We have not yet made it open because there were a lot of thoughts and original thoughts that were discussed. And we just thought that it should be preserved for all our authors' sake. Because there were many ideas which did not get translated into the paper. But there is a fair bit of possibility that they would like to write. So that's the reason Surya and I just took a decision consciously that let's not share it unless and until we have been asked to do so by all our authors, which is not the case.
Yeah, these are developing scholarships, so we have to let them come out with what they want to say.
People were also academically vulnerable. In closed door workshops, that gives you the independence to speak your mind. There is a fair bit of possibility that people will not like to be, be heard or seen in those vulnerable ideations. So yeah, those are the reasons for why we will not want to make it public.
Mhm. Okay, and a final comment from Shikha is wonderful discussion and great idea to show some photographs from the essays and also audience photographs. Can't wait to read the book and more volumes in the series. So there's clearly a mandate for another. Yeah.
Yeah, volumes, my God, I don't know. This took 5 years. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think with that, Asha, I think we're good to close
Yes.
this session. Thank you all for being here. And yeah, if you want
Yeah, thank you to everyone. And yeah, if you do another volume, we'll be here. So even if it's another 5 years, you let us know. So we'll just like block our calendars for the next thing. But thank you so much. This was really lovely. And I'm glad that we got a chance to show photographs from the book because I feel like at least now it'll take people a little while to perhaps get to the book, but at least we've given them a glimpse of what to expect. And thanks to all of you for taking time and being here and sharing your stories. And our next series script session will be looking at women in translation. So if you'd like to stay updated, so please follow us on socials and our website will be updated with the next session. Have a good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. And thank you to Shilpi, Surya, and Siddhi for doing this with us. It was really lovely.